Hello and welcome back to our read through of the entire Bible in the year 2026. We are entering into the third week of April, and this week we are going through First Chronicles chapter 14 through Second Chronicles chapter 7. Now, this latter half of First Chronicles is all about David's reign in Jerusalem, and he's at the point where he's been in Jerusalem for some time. He's setting it up as his capital. They wanted to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, and when they tried to do that, it fell on someone and he died, and the anger of the Lord burned against him. And so now we're in chapter 14, and we're at the point where, they're trying to organize things and figure things out. And David defeats a lot of his enemies, and the fear of David is brought upon all the nearby nations. It says that God has done this. And David then builds up Jerusalem and brings the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem for the first time. And they place it not in a temple because there's no temple yet. David's been told he's not allowed to build the temple. So they put it in a tent in Jerusalem. And it becomes this place where people can go. And people worship there before the Ark of the Covenant in Jerusalem. And David continues to defeat his enemies all around him. And even when his men are disgraced, he goes and he avenges them. He captures city. They kill the giants. And David's continuing to try and organize things and prep things for building the temple in Jerusalem. And at a certain point, David has a census to see how strong he is, how many people he can bring and conscript into his army. Up to this point, it's been largely a volunteer force where people sought David out to fight in his army. Now he's seeing how many he can conscript, and God does not like that. And a plague comes upon the people for 3 days, and it stops at this one point just north of Jerusalem. And there David goes and he buys the land that is there, and he builds an altar there at the top of this hill. And it's there that he builds the altar, and that'll become where the temple will be built by his son Solomon. Now, from chapters 22 through the end is basically David just organizing all the different people who are going to be in charge of the temple, and he's organizing the Levites and making sure that each group of Levite has a job, or how often they're going to be called up to worship at the temple. And he organizes the priestly family so that they get like 2 months on, 3 months off, or something along that line. And he continues through this, and he gives charge of the temple to his son Solomon, saying that you're going to be the one who builds it. And it continues with, and it ends with Solomon being anointed as king and David dying. Now, Chronicles presents this in a much different light in the book of Samuel, where there's all these other controversies and political intrigue and backstabbing that goes on in the book of Samuel. In Chronicles, it skips over all of that because it's focused on the temple itself and the worship of God and how that is going to work. And so Second Chronicles opens with Solomon becoming king, and he worships God at Gibeon, which is a few miles north of Jerusalem, and God gives him this promise saying that he will give to Solomon anything he desires. And Solomon says, well, I need wisdom in order to lead this people. And God says, I will give you just that and everything else that you could have asked for. But then Solomon goes and he builds the temple, and they have a lot of details about how much of every which material went into building the temple, and they even name some of the people who were working on it. And it gets to this point where they build the temple and they furnish it, and they bring the ark into the temple, And Solomon prays and blesses the people and then prays for the prayer of dedication over the temple. And he prays this prayer and says, look, God, we want this to be your house. And so whenever people pray in this place or pray towards this place, we want you to hear our prayers. And as he is finishing this prayer, fire comes down from heaven and ignites the altar that sits right in front of the temple, the altar of burnt offering, showing that God has accepted this temple as the place of worship. And then it says that as Solomon finished the house of the Lord, it gets to this point where it says that God comes to him and says, if my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins and I will heal their land. God is basically saying, I am answering your prayer. Anyone who prays to me, so long as they humble themselves and seek me and turn from their wicked ways, I will answer their prayers. And so the temple is finished and God is there and everything is looking good. And that's how we end chapter 7 of 2nd Chronicles. But if we've learned anything from reading scripture this far, it's that when things start to look really good, trouble follows. But we'll have to save that for next week.